Well, thanks everyone for joining our webinar today. Today's focus is on sort of getting started on precision ag, really focused around the Western Downs region of Queensland today. The other workshops have been spread all over the northern region. So it's great to have some local farmers from those areas to talk about their experiences, and the differences in the geographical regions is quite interesting. So it's been really good to have a good spread of presenters. So first, I'd like to thank GRDC for funding these workshops. They've made these 5 workshops available to grain growers and industry. We also are supported by FarmLink and SPA, the Society for Precision Agriculture in Australia. So I appreciate their support. I guess, we've sort of been doing this, precision ag game for over 25 years, and we're really at a point now where we're seeing quite big adoption, and I think GRDC is conscious that we need to get really simple, hands-on, sort of practical stuff out to growers to really so they can really focus on getting started and beginning the journey with simple tools rather than complicated solutions, which has sort of plagued the industry in the past. So hopefully we can get that across to you today. This webinar will be recorded, and it was being recorded and will be available on Zoom as well. On YouTube. So I guess going back to the basics here, why are we here? What's the problem we're trying to solve? And I think too often than not, we focus on technology, not necessarily on the problem. So most farmers in the room will know that the yield variability in every paddock is massive. This is the yield map below showing the variability, and typically, some areas of the paddock might be 4.5 tonnes, other areas 1.5 tonnes per hectare, for example. And I can tell you, over the last 25 or 20 odd years, I've looked at hundreds and thousands of yield maps, and they're all pretty much the same. Doesn't matter where you go in the country. So, and it's probably fair to say that this paddock here down the bottom, anything in red is probably losing money because we're applying the same rate of inputs across all of those hectares. So we've got this very big efficiency gap between what's applied and what's causing, low yielding and high yielding areas. And we're often over fertilizing poor performing areas and under fertilizing other areas that are actually growing well. And in fact, talking about the Western Downs, I did some EM analysis for a client the other day out near Chinchilla, and in his poorer areas that haven't grown any crop, he's now got upwards of 1,000 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare available. So he's been putting nitrogen on for probably 30 years, and the crop has not been extracting it. Compared to the areas where he's got good crop, is down sort of 60 units of N. So there's a very, very big inefficiency happening there, and we need to understand the drivers of that and try and repair that to fix that to really boost productivity and improve profitability. And I think adoption of precision ag tools has been pretty slow. And that's not the fault of the growers' willingness to do this. It's really largely, it comes around to the technology not being simple enough to actually implement this in a value proposition. So I think we're at that point now where we're getting there. So let's start with what's not new. I guess we're still trying to solve the same agronomic problems, like soil constraints and fertilizer, variable fertility in our soils. Where our plant populations change due to soil conditions and planting conditions. We've still got weeds, pests and diseases, and often we struggle with harvest timing. And so, those sort of problems haven't gone away. Like I said, we already need to be more efficient with our inputs. We're over-fertilising areas that aren't producing much and under-fertilising areas that are, and therefore there's a constraint on productivity and efficiency. What is changing though is that we're getting increasing access to data. I'm going to talk about some satellite imagery shortly, where every farm in the world has had an image over it every 5 days for the last 5 years. So that's a heck of a lot of data that you've got at your fingertips that could be used to start down this journey. So it's now massively available, and there's also a huge amount of suppliers coming online. So we're going to see increasing quality and reliability and resolution. coming in the years ahead. We've, every yield monitor, every harvest has now got a yield monitor. We're now at about 70% adoption of yield monitoring. The thing is that only half the people that have got a yield monitor actually look at a yield map. So there's a big gap there, and we need to fix that. We've got soil mapping, like electromagnetics is now commonly available. Topography mapping, every time your tractor runs across the paddock, you are basically collecting elevation data, and now we're GPS referencing, hopefully, most of our soil sampling. So the tools are now becoming simpler to use, and all of those interoperability issues that have plagued the industry for years are slowly disappearing. So, can this plug into this, or, what files does the machine take is actually improving considerably. Also, every new machine, a reasonable sized machine that's come into the country in the last 12 months is all connected to the internet. So it's going to make our life easier of transferring data. So that's what's changing, and I think that's a really exciting place to be. Obviously, we still have major connectivity issues in the bush with phone coverage, but that will only improve as time goes on. So let's just start with some of the key layers, right? Just to give you an idea. Like I said at the start, we need to be focused on what the problem is and what you're actually fixing, not the technology, but it helps to know what technology is out there so that you've got some idea how you might use these things. So things like GPS reference soil testing is really good for understanding fertilizer requirements and soil constraints, and often you'll be targeted with that using a, say, satellite image, a yield map, an EM map, for example. So really important to GPS reference all of our soil tests going forward. And I'm more than confident to say we should never ever do blended soil testing ever again. There is absolutely no. I think there's very little point in doing it, and it often asks more questions than it answers. So I think we need to be targeted every time. Yes, you're going to spend more money on soil testing. That's a given. You're going to spend 3 times as much money on soil testing. However, you're going to get 10 times the information. So I think we've got to draw a line in the sand and get away from this, just a general drive across the paddock and collect samples. There's been a big push for grid soil testing in the south, particularly around lime and phosphate. And I think, paddock history plays a role there, where often other layers like EM don't pick up those differences. But in some cases they do too. Elevation mapping, like I said, it's a really good layer. It's drainage is a major problem in the grain growing areas of Australia. It's probably one of our biggest constraints that we don't pay enough attention to, but elevation data is really important there. And as we go further north, and today we're talking about the Western Downs, the Roma region, then soil erosion becomes a massive problem. We had quite a bit of discussion yesterday about soil erosion as well, around the northern New South Wales region. So, you can use your elevation mapping for planning your contour banks, drainage, all that sort of stuff. EM soil mapping, electromagnetics, it's not new technology, but it's getting much more widely adopted now in agriculture. Perfect for picking up soil types, your soil depth, you might have a sand over a clay, like a duplex soil, perfect for picking up that. Or you might have a shallow clay over, say, bedrock, like we do in central Queensland. And again, it's very good for picking up that because it's detecting clay content. Also potentially used for variable rate gypsum. So salts and sodium sort of go together most of the time in our environment, especially in these areas we're talking about. And it's a good surrogate measure for picking up gypsum. And we'll see some great examples today of variable rate gypsum, which shows how useful that can be. Satellite imagery, like I mentioned, is now on tap. Beautiful for looking at in-crop management, and also the long-term trends, because I said there's every 5 days for the last 5 years there's an image over your farm. Well, that's perfect for picking up those long-term trends. Yield mapping, 80% of headers now got yield mapping. Well, perfect for replacement of phosphate if you're looking at that, if you're a heavy user of phosphate. Trials, analysing those trials to determine what is the return on investment from a treatment. So you're doing a fertiliser trial, you really need that yield data to actually work out your return on investment. your performance. Obviously, it's the ultimate measure of your crop growing performance. So therefore, it's a great layer for doing that. And again, trends. Many people have, multiple years, 15 years of yield data, and much of it's a bit of a mess, right? But at least it's giving you those long-term trends as well. Protein mapping, we're seeing a big interest in protein mapping now. You can't really do variable rate nitrogen unless you have protein. You need to work out crop removals. You need nitrogen times your, you need your protein times your yield times your crop factor, gives you nitrogen extraction. And it's perfect for doing that. And I'll show you some good slides on that later. Many growers are using it for blending as well as they go to achieve their optimal protein content in their grain. And finally, I think the other important layer is obviously the machinery data. All the machines now are giving you fuel use maps, also things like record keeping, very important. And the other crazy thing is we see the impact of human behavior on our yield maps. I've seen many times where an operator in a planting rig will say up a couple of gears in the middle of the night because he's a bit bored, and you can see the impact of that on the yield maps. So we totally underestimate the impact of our human behaviours on the performance of our cropping. And I think the machinery data really does highlight those issues. I will say too, if you've got any questions at any time, feel free just to jump in, put those into the chat or the Q&A box. We're happy to answer those as we go. So yeah, welcome those questions. Please send them through. Just want to dig a little bit deeper into some of these things. Elevation mapping. Every time you run across your country, like I said, you're collecting an elevation map. So this is an example from New South Wales, from one of our first workshops. One of the growers there. You can. This is also from LiDAR, which is laser scanning. You can get this data freely available now in a lot of places. Probably not so much on the Western Downs. There's not as much activity been out there, but certainly you can get this sort of data where you can see. In this case, this photograph was taken along this edge. You can see where the ponding is occurring here, and this is the impact in the paddock. So the grower's in there right now, actually, with a laser bucket fixing up some of these problems. So it's a really, really good base layer. It also reflects soil types quite a bit. Rapid soil mapping. There's electromagnetics has been around for a long time, but the tools we've now got make it really, really quick and easy to collect. We've now got a number of these units across the country, so we're hiring those out. And what that does is you can just drive this across your landscape at sort of 20 to 30 metre swaths. It measures down 1.5 metres into the soil profile, and it picks up three things. It picks up clay content, moisture content, and salt content. Now, in a non-saline soil, it's going to be detecting mostly your clays and the different soil types. But where you've got salt, it really does detect that quite clearly. And I guess really importantly, like all of the layers I'm talking about, you need the ground truth. And to detangle what this is actually telling you, it's very important you do that. And it will highlight what those issues are, but it gives you a really, really nice base layer. And we'll see some EM mapping today as well. Imagery on tap, it's a great tool for looking at your production in real time. And you can see here I guess the biggest important factor to note about satellite imagery is it's picking up things that you can't see with your naked eye. Because it's working in the infrared spectrum, very, very sensitive to chlorophyll content. So whilst you're, the bigger, the greener, the healthier the crop, the higher the number in the vegetation index. And this is represented here in, say, like the blue areas. So on this particular day, these blue areas were the best part of that field, and the red areas were the worst part of that field. Not saying it's a bad crop, just saying that's the worst part of the field on that day in terms of greenness and health. So a great little tool. It's called Ndvi. It's a vegetation index, commonly used across a lot of platforms. We're also working on some cloud-free options. So obviously this relies on reflectance from the ground, and you need to have cloud-free imagery, and I'll show that later on. multiple year stacking is now achievable either with yield maps or with satellite data. This is an example. This client will be talking tomorrow at a webinar tomorrow. We stacked 5 years of satellite data together, went and ground truthed that with some soil tests. You can see the black dots here on the right. 5 zones it came out of this. It just completely reflected in the field where the soil depth problems were, and we've been able to reduce rates of fertilizer in these areas and up them down on the flats to account for that soil depth issue. So really, really simple tool to actually do that. And you can go back 5-6 years now. We did some work with Summit Fertilisers in Western Australia this year, where we're using the 5-zone long-term stack product. We converted that to 3 zones simply to put in nitrogen response trials. So if we're going to look at any sort of trialling, you need to understand what the variability is of the field first. And if you own your own property and you've been there a while, you sort of understand that. But for those that are looking at new properties or just trying to get a better handle on their responsiveness to different fertilizer rates, you need to make sure you're putting those through the high, medium and low parts of the field. So often I see trials put in completely the wrong spot because they don't understand the variability of the field. We did some work in Western Australia a while back, and it turns out that not one trial was put in the low areas of the field. They'll always put in the better parts because they want to see good responses, but often you get your best responses in your poorest areas. So it's really important you do that. So from those 3 zones, we actually put strip trials in 10 paddocks this year. And this is, you can see the strip trial through the middle and the buffer we did around it. And this is the whole field Ndvi on this particular day. So that's the whole paddock. You can pull the strip out and the buffer. So we're comparing now what is the strip response to what is the buffer response around it that's not treated. And from here we know that in fact every one of these 10 paddocks still needed nitrogen because we could pick up the nitrogen responsiveness in the satellite data every 5 days. So really useful tool for doing trials as well. I guess what we're trying to do is make this really quick and easy to get data and out to the machines. So with the satellite data, you can get the data, zone it up into 3 zones really, really quickly, add your rates, get a file and go and apply that. Literally within 5 minutes, you could be doing that. So we're trying to, people make these decisions quickly in response to issues that are happening, and the sort of tools that we're building will help get this out to the marketplace really quickly. This shows like a zone map on the screen and the zone map in the cab. Like I said, last year alone saw 2,500 tractors, sprayers and harvesters. All of them pretty much are connected to the internet now. So we can push this zone map that we created on the screen in the software, push that straight to the machine, and this is it appearing in the machine. You can still obviously use the old way of a USB stick, but all of the software now pretty much operates on a shapefile, and that's really good because now everyone's getting to a common standard, which means, this makes this whole process a lot easier. So yeah, and on Friday, we're actually going to have all the manufacturers talking about how you do this in each of their own machines. So join us on Friday if you want to hear more about that. The yield mapping, obviously yield mapping has issues, and Scott's going to talk today about some of the issues they've had. Often we'll see the imagery match the yield map pretty closely, not always, but most of the time you will. But yield maps are obviously the final performance indicator and what you get paid on. Obviously, also you can have things like frost where you might get a frost event that looks good in the imagery, but it is obviously a low yield in the yield map. So they're the sort of things that can happen pre-harvest. And finally, I just want to finish on protein mapping. It's getting a big interest in Australia right now. This is just some material I stole off the CropScan website. They sell a machine, Australian made, where you can get your protein map on the left here, top left. And if we look at the yield map in the middle, you can see there's a completely opposite relationship. So high yield, low protein, vice versa. Like I said, you've got to combine those two things times by your crop factor to get your nitrogen removal map. And this is that here. And this is, obviously then I would recommend ground truthing, because often some of these effects might be caused by something like waterlogging, which is not a nitrogen response. So you need to check about what's causing that, and then go and apply your nitrogen based on that. So that's pretty much all I had to cover off on, just on the basics, just to get you sort of started. Feel free to contact us if you have any sort of questions on that. Feel free now to keep throwing up questions in the Q&A and the chat boxes if you like. So yeah, throw those up. I'm just wondering, Trent, Trent, are you there, mate? Trent was still joining us. He was running a bit late, so I might just.
Yeah, Tim, I'm on channel there.
Yeah, mate. Do you want to just wait, or do you want to go now? I can flip over to Peter quickly.
Just trying to get some better range. That's all.
Right, I'll flip over to Peter first, and then we'll cover off on your stuff when you get in a bit better coverage, mate. Peter, are you right to share your screen, or do you want me to run your session?
If you can run it for me, if you wouldn't mind, it'll be really quick run through. So just a bit of background stuff.
Right, do you want to start with a bit of who you are and where you're from and what you do?
Yep, thanks very much, Tim. So farming between Roma and Taroom. Been here all my life, going way back 1983, pre-PA, but actually started tramlining. It was the first precision agriculture we did, matched our planter to our spray rig to our planter. And just I know a lot of this everyone's just doing, but an interesting observation that happened to us about 3 years into that really simple thing, and some people may not have done it yet. Got a big storm just before harvest, and so still just a bit of green in the crop. We're actually waiting for the 2 rows either side of the tram line to ripen. Everything else was pretty well right to go. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the photo to share with you, but effectively after the storm, we had a flat paddock with 4 rows, one either side of each wheel track standing up. And simple solution to that was to throw the seed that should have gone in the tram line. Instead of spreading it evenly everywhere else across the machine, we doubled up by the side of the tram lines and cured that issue. So for anyone that hasn't, going way back to that sort of thing, hasn't done that, that's a really simple way to cure late ripening around tramline. That drawing there, it's just showing where, and this is going well back before there was any standardising on how many metres wide a machine would be. Ours happened to be 14.5 metres. The pink lines there is the compaction, or the tractor duals, tracks, trying to get wheels and air seeders and God knows what to all line up. You just jump to the next one, a typical photo of the sort of tractor a lot of people use. Big duals, spread the weight. We thought we'd cured all our issues until we found all we'd done was effectively created compaction. So the inner tyres were on the tram line, the air seeder was on that, the sprayer was on that, and those outer duals mixed with the tyres on the planter were effectively, we had 25% of our planter width was being impacted. Just jumped through, Tim. I mean, a lot of this stuff's old hat to a lot of people, but just to give a bit of background, so onto the tram lines, just the view, and typical of our country here, it actually looks a whole lot flatter in the images, but a believer in one thing I have concern about is everyone knocking their trees out of their cultivations. We've always kept them there. I know they can be an inconvenience, and either keep operators awake at night time or cause machinery damage. But I think we've got to look at the bigger picture of what we're doing to our landscapes. So that's that one. Just next one, please, Tim. And result of that was about a memory, it's not showing there in the screen, but it's nudging 4 tonne to the hectare dry land on some of our very best country. Wheat crop, that's about 2016, I think, from memory. So going on to the next one, just a standard Trimble screen. All just basic stuff that people will have whatever version of that in their tractors these days, but obviously for anyone just starting out, it's probably the very first thing that you go into. Next screen. So we've gone away from the duals to quad track, and other than for the fact that tracks don't like stones, which I thought they were actually going to be better than the tyres. I wouldn't go back to tyres again. You get so much easier to sort out all your tram lining, reducing compaction, etc. Next one, please. So we've totally changed our operation here. And very little grain cropping at the moment. And I was interested with all the yield. I've always been fascinated by the satellite imagery, the yield maps, what we can do to. The old thinking was that, basically you had to bring the poor country up to the good country. And obviously people have worked out that we've actually got to look at the limitations of the soil. And I think it's something that we have to really seriously consider in grain cropping in general in Australia. We're busily putting a lot of inputs into soil that was either never meant to be cropped or certainly never meant to be cropped for any significant length of time. And we spent many years, 40 odd years of growing, I spent 40 odd years of growing grain crops and got to a point where I thought I was doing a pretty good job given our soil constraints, our weather constraints and whatever, and had a bit of an aha moment over the last few years, stopping and really looking at exactly what we should be doing with our soils. And this particular paddock here developed a role at crimper planter along with a Charlie Lang from Dalby. That's going through a forage sorghum crop that had hay cut off at 12 months ago, or in May, sorry, 18 months ago. And then just let it come back. And in that photo was taken in about early January, late December, ran the crimper over it, did nothing else to it at all, just ran the crimper over it. And our first, it was only 20 hectares. Last year we cut 40 big bales of hay off there on the first time round, just creeping it, doing nothing else to it, getting some rain in January, February, running on the tram lines, etc. Came up with 164 big bales, no fertiliser. So that's the other thing I also have considerable concerns is just the amount of fertiliser that we're trying to jam into our soils. And interested, Tim, when you made that comment about people with on Western Downs on some of their saltier, I'll describe it, or higher EC soils with 1,000 units of nitrogen sitting there. So I think we've got to be really aware with the whole PA thing, exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it. So next slide.
It's not, hold on. There you go. It's not clicking for me.
Yeah, so that's just a close-up of the crimper in action. A cockatoo damaged barley crop. So yeah, just for those that are interested in seeing what it actually does. Next one again, please. Yeah, I doubled up and next, yeah, so next one. So our PA here has, because of our major swing, we've always been in livestock, but our major swing to livestock is a form of precision agriculture, the cattle we're using AgriWeb. Some of you will be aware of it. And that's just an overview of part of the place and some of the infrastructure. You can click on anywhere there and get down to details of water troughs, paddock areas, crop histories, grass histories, etc. So next one.
Can I just ask one quick question, Peter? Like, just to give people context about the Western Downs region, we're talking about, highly variable rainfall. Like you get these extremes and long duration dry spells, and then often in the dry years, I reckon it rains more out west than it does in close to the coast where we are in Toowoomba. But give us some sense about your variability of your rainfall and your variability of your soils, because that's what really drives your systems, isn't it?
Yep, actually, there'll be one of these images will show.
Oh, sorry.
The variability of soil. But
I've jumped ahead. Sorry, mate.
You're right. Go back to that other one. So rainfall, 2011, the wet years, 10, 11, we had 64, I'm talking inches here, 64 inches and 60 inches. Our long-term average is 26. In 2019, we had 4 inches. Yes, and it is, I really feel we've always been variable, summer dominant, but highly variable. A good winter cropping year for us would be to get 4 inches of rain between planting in May and harvest in October. That's when we'd sort of pull those 3.5, 4 tonne to the hectare yields if we could get 4 inches, 100 mils in crop, provided obviously stored the summer moisture.
That's pretty serious water efficiency, mate. That sort of breaks all the records when you're going 4 tonnes on 100 mils of in-crop rain plus probably 150 mils of stored.
Yeah, and that's where for a long time thought we were doing really well, but started to look at the with the dry. So 17, 18, 19, we were 17 inches, 13 inches, 4 inches. It just, we've got trees have died, big low suckers have died. That's proper dry. Even this year, we've only planted very little bit of winter crop, and it hasn't come to anything much. You don't have to travel too far from here to the south of us, and they've had a reasonable winter season, and even to the east of us. But that's, I think we all need to realise that that variability is just going to get greater and greater. Soil variability, I look at some of these imagery of country on the downs or even down around Gundy or some of the what we deem better areas, and dream of the fact that you could have a paddock that's probably got 2 or 3 different soil types. I reckon we can have 2 or 3 different soil types in 100 metres, but our good soils are really good and our poor soils are poor. And we've tended to, and this has come through the iometer before we had the good PA stuff, and then with our onboard yield monitors and just recordings, tended to zone our farming. And in 1993 and 94, we had 2 1 in 100 year frosts 2 years in a row. And that basically, that second year or the 2 years, we lost about 1/3 of our winter grain crop. And as a result of that, and mapping that with a GPS on the 4-wheeler, we literally just stopped growing winter grains in the lower country. I was able to map the frost thing. In this day and age, satellites, all sorts of things will do it. So we have been playing around the edge of PA for a long time. So just on to the next one. So this, for those of you that have got grazing as well, and when I talk about the PA, you can see things there like in the middle of the screen, feed on offer, grazing days remaining. We've been heavily involved with, so Phil Tickle from SIBO Labs provides the data that, the satellite data that goes into AgriWeb, and we've done a lot of the huge amount of the ground truthing for this region, but also particularly around buffel grass. And an interesting thing, I think we all need to be aware of, any remote sensing, precision agriculture side of things, and Tim, you mentioned ground truthing a few times. One issue we were finding with on our better, heavier country, when we get down to about 1.2 tonne to the hectare left, we'd start to see an increase. If you got down to what we were physically measuring as a tonne was showing up as 1.5 tonne to the hectare, and we're getting soil colour issues coming through. So there's been, that's constantly being worked on, but just be very aware of the fact that, and Tim, you'll no doubt speak to this, but the satellite data it's getting much, much better, but we've still got some fine tuning of the ground truthing to go. So just on to the next one. So that's straight Ndvi of here a couple of days ago. I'm not sure if the date's there, but Tim's saying that's every 5 days. And when we get this great, and we've got a whole series of imagery we can get, you look at that, and it's basically, other than where the green is, which is timbered country, looks pretty depressing. We just go on to the next one. So this is, and I just can't remember, Tim, you'll know this one. This is a different imagery, but it's, if you look at that legend down the bottom corner, you've got non-green as blue, green as green, and red as bare. Very different story. And then all the combinations in between. So we need to be very aware of what you're actually looking at and what you're asking for in the satellite data. What we're just on the sort of more precision side of things. So a couple of things here. We talked before about the machine, our tractors have all got the live to internet connection, and interesting to see what people do and don't do when you're not home. You can see it live, but this likes of this AgriWeb, it's like with anyone working with us here has a copy of it on their phone, and they can actually see, the blue dot follows them around, so they can see if someone new, they can see where they are on the farm. And we're just about to start trialling GPS ear tags on a mob of cattle that we've got on a walkover way trial. And everyone will be saying, what's this got to do with precision ag in a cropping sense? Probably not a lot, but some time ago, I was at a precision ag conference and talked about the fact that we've actually got once we've got livestock connected, live access to where they're going, we've got another whole lot of data collection, and livestock have got a really good natural method of working out where the good grass, the good country, the good soil or whatever is. And I think the data that we're going to be able to start getting out of that will certainly interplay with some of our cropping side of things. So those of you that were expecting to see a whole lot of fantastic PA things and putting all sorts of variable rate, whatever. Sorry to disappoint you, but
we got variable rate feeding.
Yeah,
variable rate grazing. They work it out themselves.
So I mean, and just on that, one of the things. So I did agricultural engineering decades ago, and 3 of us got together, 45 years ago or something. 3 of us got together and were given this assignment to look 30 years into the future, and the 3 of us came up with this wild idea of having no fences, having cattle controlled by something that would stop them. And here we've got GPS collars. We were going to have driverless tractors. We had all the whiz-bangery, and here it's becoming a reality. But that controlled grazing, I mean, there is that potential with, once we get the collars or the GPS control of livestock sorted, there's a whole lot of really good stuff that I can see that we can integrate into our cropping country. And just as a closing, I've come the full circle on livestock and crops. So my father was always much to my annoyance, was always wanting to put cattle straight onto cultivations after harvest and leave them on too long and all the rest of it. And I actually went through a period which a lot of croppers go through, and some are still stuck in, that grain cropping and livestock are two totally separate entities. Don't ever mix them. A really important cycle by not allowing cattle into our cultivation system. So for those of you that have no fences, don't worry, GPS will sort that out. GPS collars will sort that out shortly. But yeah, I think people need to be really mindful of looking at what their country's meant to do, rather than what we as humans think we should be making it do. And I'll leave it at that.
That's excellent, Peter. Yeah, spot on. And I mean, should remind people that 70% of all croppers in Australia actually run livestock. So it's not like it's an odd thing to run livestock and cropping in Australia. And in fact, the vast majority do run both. So it is a fine balancing act. And I guess the more you go west and north, the more the mixed systems are reliant on that sort of interaction, but they can also do a lot of damage to cropping land. So yeah, they need to be treated respectfully in each of the areas. But I think that the technology increase in grazing is increasing quicker than, you know, we've been through this rapid phase in grain cropping, and now I guess you know, animal livestock systems are catching up. If there's any questions, throw them into the chat box, and Peter will be more than happy to answer them. So yeah, type any questions you like any time. We've had a couple questions about the cost of some of this activities. So, you know, some of this data is obviously free. Different programs have different charging amounts. Yeah, so we can probably won't go into too much detail now about that, but there is, yeah, there's quite a bit of data available for free as well. So I'll just flip over to Trent. I'll run your slides. Obviously.
I'll just ask a quick question, Tim.
Okay, mate, yep.
Of Peter. Peter, sorry, you broke up there a little while. Must be my connection. But did you say some of your cattle end up on your cultivation, or you do treat them as completely separate areas?
So we went through a period where cattle were banned, and now yeah, something's wrong if we're not putting cattle on at a significant amount of, yeah, I mean, a managed amount of the time, but yeah, it's very much come back to utilising cattle in there. And a good example is this summer just gone, where it's been, well, yeah, nearly 12 months ago now, incredibly dry. The rate that we've been what we've been earning from adjustment on cattle on, it's actually our very best wheat paddock. We would have needed to have averaged 3.6 tonne to the hectare at $300 a tonne on farm.
Wow.
To equal what we've earned off cattle eating stuff we normally spend a fortune killing. And the cultivation has got perfect ground cover at the moment, is as dry as can be, but so it's where, yeah, I think we've got to really carefully rethink our separation of cropping and livestock.
Do you anticipate being able to use any of the information that you hopefully going to gather with these ear tags in your cattle around, as you say, you know, cattle will hopefully identify for you, or they will identify the better areas through their interest in feeding in that particular part of the paddock. Do you think there'll be layers around compaction and its impact on your next crop that you might be able to get out of these cattle movements, or you're trying to manage the cattle obviously as best you can in terms of wet weather and dry weather, so they're not going to be on there when they're going to be compacting the ground?
Yes, so we've always ensured that there's a paddock right next door to a cultivation paddock for cattle to be moved onto, and sometimes we've moved cattle sooner than we need. You know, you move them and it doesn't rain. So we've we do all our mustering on four-wheelers. So one of the things, our sloping country here, really dislike motorbikes on cultivation country, because unless you follow tram lines or we've got very specific layout of how we physically farm the country. Motorbikes are, you think cattle are bad making cattle pads, motorbikes are worse for creating that first furrow to create erosion, water erosion issues.
Cool. Well, thank you. Thanks very much for sharing your experiences, Peter. It's very much appreciated, and it's good to see your journey and the whole cycle, and that you have a crystal ball, which is good. So that's be able to predict the future. That's good. I'd like to.
I don't know about predicting too much, but thanks.
Yeah, well, it's finally come to reality, which is really exciting. And some of the stuff that Swarm Farm have been doing, it really excites me that we're actually, really starting to make this stuff happen now. It's beyond a thought pattern. So yeah, it's good. I'd like to introduce Trent Hyman. Trent's joining us from the comfort of his Prado by the looks of it. Out in the field, mate. Thanks for joining us, and give us a bit of background of who you are, where you come from, and then we'll hook into your presentation.
Thanks, Tim. Can you hear me okay? Is that right?
Yeah, it's a bit stuttery, but see how you go.
Try that. Is that a bit better?
Yep.
Thanks, Tim, for the opportunity to present this data farming example we've done on Cypress Downs at Yulba. So, farm approximately 1,300 hectares on the Western Downs, and 2 areas is north of Yulba, and also just at Jalaka. There's two farms that we operate. That I use contract with that size of cultivation. I've weaned myself off owning my own machinery, and I've just gone to nearly a full contractor model now, with the neighbours at Yulba help with operations throughout the year. And then there's that's Ndvi pastoral, and then also use Guy Matthews from Chinchilla and Brad Parton from Chinchilla. They both do planting or harvesting, or do basically give a full service on farm operations. So I'm an absent. I actually live in Brisbane, so I'm an absent. Technically, I liked him the other day. You said that farming on the Western Downs is a hobby, and I'd probably agree with you on that at times. It's an expensive hobby, so it's live in Brisbane and using some remote. I think it's that absentee word is, but precision ag and some of this satellite stuff allows you to be present, looking at where your crop is and how you're managing it throughout the year. So I've got a background in agronomy as a broad acre agronomist. So a lot of the time people say to me, how do you run your farm when you live in Brisbane? So all these tools, smartphones and satellites, all let you be in the paddock, really. So that's been a good journey from how we used to do farming. Had to be in the paddock. So is that still okay, Tim? It's coming up a bit unstable, my internet connection. Is that? Yeah,
it's a bit. You can probably turn your video off now that we've got that background, so that might help. It came through fine, mate. Gotcha. It's just a little bit breaking up a little bit, but maybe shut the video down now. Yeah, that might.
How's that? Is that a bit better now?
Yeah, I think it'll come online. It's our fantastic coverage across our nation.
No, I'm about 15 k's out of Dalby, so there you go.
Oh, so yeah.
So Tim, I'll just this particular paddock here we're looking at.
I'll just
on the left we call it bull.
Yep, I'll zoom in as you go around, mate.
Yeah, so that paddock, you put the pointer down. Yeah, that's what we call bull ring paddock. So this paddock here, we're I think about these paddocks, and I've got a real focus on below the ground at the moment, like subsoil constraints and nutrition. That this paddock's been farmed with winter cereals a lot of oats crops, a lot of winter cereals. 50 years of cultivation here or longer. And back in, it just so happened that Tim, I asked Tim to come out. We were doing on this property is about 5 k's of gas pipeline running through it. And I was investigating some subsoil and topsoil mixing by the pipeline contractor. And we used the SWAT box that we did an EM38 on this pipeline. And that's a separate matter, but that's ongoing, that work. But whilst we were doing that, I said, Tim, let's go and do bull ring paddock and we'll do an EM38 over it. We bashed across that paddock after harvest and we generated an EM38 map.
I'll just jump to that now, mate.
That was the map, and that was up in the northeast corner. It was very sodic soil. We've got some. This is Brigalow Balar country, more Brigalow this paddock than Balar. It's sedicity is an issue there on the surface crusting, and it's never really grown a lot of dry matter, poor yields, and it's been quite problematic. And I knew that the early gypsum work was, I needed to put gypsum on this country because it's a heavy clay. Even the paddock to the north of it, it was only ever lighter countries. So that was the goal, just to get an EM38 to look at then matching it up to some NVDI work was what we did with Tim. I'll
jump over that now, mate. So this is the NDVI, prior to any application.
Yeah, so just jump back before this. That's September 2020. In 19, we'd actually gone in and deep ripped fertilizer, NP, phosphorus and potassium into it. I've been always wanting to do, with the research and what's happening with stratification of phosphorus. And we'd always been putting 20 years of putting on starter fertilizer. It was all, I knew that we had to, it was a bit of a no-brainer that we had to go and load some phosphorus at depth. And also in 19, when we did this, it was a very dry profile, and we had it, the ripping, it was TTQ, one of their deep rippers, and Guy Matthews from Chinchilla, he put on 180 kilos of, what seems to be the standard now of phosphorus and potassium, MAP and MOP together. So we put that in at 30 centimeters, and it's ideal ripping conditions. Like if I think that if there was a label on deep ripping, it should say, similar to a chemical label, do not deep rip when it's wet, because we're wanting that shattering effect. And I was very happy with the shattering effect. We loaded this soil up with P&K, and then 2020, that NVDI map, Tim, if you jump to that, that was probably the best wheat crop I've grown there for a long time. I put it down to the deep rip and the P, and that's 80 hectares, that paddock, and I think it was doing, it's 2.5 tonne to the hectare in that paddock. So that was to put it into context around its poor performance before. That was a very good crop out of there. But that NDVI is showing up. There's still work to be done in that, and that matched up to the EM38. There's a good. You can talk about that, Tim, if you'd like to. That the correlation between those two.
Yeah, well, you can sort of see them on the left-hand side there. I know it's a bit hard to see, or maybe on a small screen, but there's obviously good linkages between what we see in the soil types and what the crop was showing back in 2020. So yeah, pretty good correlation there. So that's when we jumped across to the zoning. Do you want to jump onto that now?
Yeah, sure. So just back on that, Tim. I mean, If you're in the paddock and you grab that soil in your hand up in the where it's sodic, it's sort of, you'd nearly skin your knuckles if you pick that dirt up. It's very, it lacked a lot of tilth on the top. It was hard, hard sodic clay that needed something done to it. So that was then the zoning, we'd actually finished harvest on 2020, and I said, it was just one of those decisions. I said, I'm going to order some gypsum and we're going to have a crack at this to fix up this soil with gypsum applied post-harvest on the harvested, you know, we had a good layer of dry matter there, leftover harvest material. So it was just, the idea was, and it was cracked wide open. So it was then the gypsum application in November 2020. Tim's and I was in Brisbane at the time, and it was a matter of 15 minutes, and he's done the zoning for me because I wasn't using the data farming platform at this stage. I was aware of it, but I wasn't using it. And again, Tim's just done that for me straight away. 15 minutes to get that zonal map, and we agreed on the gypsum rate. So the 3.8.
That's the rates there. Yep.
We had so much gypsum to go over 80 hectares. And yeah, 3.8 and then 2.5 and 1.7 ton on the areas.
So the way we had this process is that I think you said, you know, we've got a certain amount of tons of gypsum, you know, try and balance out the rates so I can just spread it out to the exact kilo. And that's pretty much what we did. We just fiddle around with the rates because we took this zone map off that Ndvi image, basically took the image, created the zone map, fiddle around with the rates, and on our platform, it just tells you how many tons you're going to use. Trent, I think you said, oh, I've got whatever, how many tons you had. And we've just
200 ton, I think there.
200 tons, right? So we just balance it around until we got that right. And that's why it's got 1,700 in the green, or 2.5 tons in the yellow, and 3.8 tons in the red. And I guess, do you want to talk about this being this is in the machine? This is actually the rate controller.
Well, again, sitting at my desk in Brisbane, we've sent this file to the contractor, which was BS Spreading from Chinchilla, and with their truck and their loader, they've put that that map into the machine, and away they've gone and started spreading. So it's pretty neat that, you know, talk to Tim 15 minutes, email the file to the spreader driver, and he puts it into his variable rate applicator on the truck, and away it goes. So and then I was phoning the contractor at the time, and he had his head out the window. He said, "Oh, you know, I know when I'm putting out 3.8 ton because the machine's working very hard," and he'd go out of the zone and go back into the 1.7. So that was, you know, validating that, you know, that's what was happening in the paddock, and that's a shot there of up the top of that paddock. That would be nearly where that 3.8 tons going out onto the stubble.
Any questions? Feel free to throw them into the chat.
So the other good thing that was happening there was just about the timing of it. You know, cracks in the ground. We put it, you know, the truck's going out on a dry. We're getting no compaction. Another activity with no compaction on the you know, keeping machine doing an operation when it's dry, the topsoil, and then the goal here, we're going to run back into a double crop sorghum scenario here. I really wanted to see how the gypsum would perform in a double crop scenario. So we had 180 hectares of gypsum work done there, and another 120 hectares below it, which was just double cropping into the same scenario. And the photo up on the left there is we're basically, some of the philosophy around double cropping now I've got is now that, so we've eliminated all our grass weeds out of our cultivations with flame. This country's had 3 years of flame, so we've really got rid of feather top. We've got rid of barnyard grass. So with the IT sorghum, it's probably not the best variety to grow in that western area, but we went in post gypsum. We went in with flame, 100 mil of flame. imazapic, and then we had a litre of dual and a kg of atrazine. So we basically, after the gypsum, we put a residual mix on that was going to take out all the weeds that were going to grow in through the summer period. And then we planted sorghum about the 16th of January. It was a little bit late, but it didn't stop raining really for the whole of the summer then. So we had, you know, above average probably January, February, March, April. It had a great run through, and the yield there, it was a standout. It went just about 4 tonne of the hectare, the sorghum, on running through from, you know, for a double crop scenario. And it also had 200 kilos of urea spread on it through that time. So, and I walked through some of those paddocks and I couldn't find a weed. It was only sorghum, and it was, you know, the soil and the tilth of the soil, the gypsum worked pretty well straight away. It went from, like I was describing, a hard type soil to the gypsum was activated and had a great run through to harvest. And it out yielded the non-gypsum country. There was about 120 hectares below it, which was probably better soil. It's more of a Balar type soil. So we've just taken a pretty rundown sort of brigalow soil and done some deep ripping gypsum, and then some of those. Is that the current NVDI map from the sorghum then, is it, Tim, you've got there? From...
Sorry, I just on mute. Yeah, you can see, yes, that is, and that's the sorghum mid-crop. You can just see how much less variability there is because of that variable treatment that you've done. And that's what we're trying to achieve here, right, is to try and even up these paddocks to get them to perform more evenly.
Absolutely. The top end of that paddock, the northern end of that paddock, it just, and the rainfall we had, it was, you know, that sorghum was just, it's the best I've ever grown in sorghum. It just, everything came together there, you know, from agronomy plus also the rain, you know, a very good summer crop on it. I mean, summer season. So some sort of, you look at that paddock, you see that yellow line through the middle of it. That's a contour bank that runs through the middle of it. And I see there's some on the other, you know, a lot of Western Downs country's got contour banks in it to, you know, historically from erosion, managing erosion under our old farming system. So those sort of NVDI says, you know, I'd probably attack that with some, maybe spread some manure along it and really work hard at it to even that up. That was one of the things I, you know, post-mortem on looking at these maps is just even narrow down on your decision making into these areas where you can. And the yellow area over to the western side there, Tim, that area there was, we had 10 or 8 inches of rain in one night, talking earlier about extreme rainfall events. That was actually some erosion that started to occur there. And the water runs into that dam to the, you know, the north, the west, water runs down that way.
Yep.
So that needs some repair work done to it, but it just allows you to say, oh, let's get, you know, I might get some feedlot manure and do 10 tonne along that. Right, again, being just target those 2 areas to try and even the paddock up. And you know, we've gone in here and put more. We've done another deep ripping operation on this. On this country, we've loaded up again with 200 kilos of P and K, and that whole summer crop scenario, it delivered 760 tonne of sorghum delivered to Dolby, sort of around that $300 price. That was enough incentive to keep going in growing sorghum. It you know, as I said earlier, it's a lot of history of winter cropping. Sorghum, with that IT sorghum, maybe I'll just go back to a normal sorghum this year, and you know, another variety, and it allows you just to keep punching yield out of this country. So that was some of the thinking around some you know, the future plans for these paddocks.
Cool. Any questions for Trent? Any more, Trent?
Oh, Tim, the only other thing, those paddocks below it, I've ordered more gypsum. They had gypsum probably 5 years ago. That's something I'm going to try and replicate the same scenario. I just felt there was a difference between gypsum post, that double cropping scenario. There was something going on there. We had some herbicide damage from met sulfur in the 2 paddocks below it, I think. It created the sorghum just to not mature as quick as the bullring paddock, the one we've tested. And it's just suspicious on that. But I still think there's the gypsum, that calcium and sulfur, and plus the nitrogen. Felt there was a bit of a boost there. Nearly got a tonne to the hectare more out of that bullring paddock, and whether it was deep end that wasn't utilised down in the roots would have got down way into that the bucket, the clay bucket down the bottom, the nitrogen and more moisture. But that we've had a wet winter, so that it's 3/4 full at the moment. It just doesn't need much to go again, really.
That's good. Yeah, I think you're going to get a combination effect, aren't you? You're going to get a ripping release effect of some nitrogen. You're putting your DP down anyway, and your potassium, like you say. You get your soil structure sorted out with a bit of gypsum, and hopefully you're getting better water infiltration, better usage of that water as well when it comes to these dry finishes.
Some of the judges were saying it's as good as the Downs out there, but it takes a bit of work to and a bit of money. The DPs, if you're spending $100 an acre on DP and just in the fertilizer, and then another using a contractor, $30 plus diesel, and then $100 an acre on gypsum. It's a worthwhile investment these days on land values, and to see those results, it's you got to shut your eyes and spend the money, and hopefully everything goes to plan, and you come out the other end okay.
That's one of the questions is, do you accept the soil limitations, or do you try and fix them? And it's a very good question, because my opinion is that in the first instance, we try and fix them because it is worth doing from a variability point of view and productive soils point of view. But where we have limitations, you're not going to fix, like soil depth, like the guy we're going to talk about tomorrow, or was talking tomorrow, then we just wind back the rates, because you're not going to fix a 50 centimetre deep soil profile. It's 50 centimetres, that's what it is. It's not going to perform like an 80 centimetre, 100 centimetre deep soil profile. But, and realign your fertilizers to the high production areas of the field. So you might not save any fertilizer at all, but you actually are trying to get the most out of the bang for your buck. Peter, you got a comment on that?
Yeah, just a question, just to clarify, Trent, you're talking dollars per acre there, which I did a few quick numbers. It's a huge amount per hectare. What length of time do you see, or do you hope that this treatment will effectively, to me, you're trying to get it back to what the country was like when we first started farming it, and I look at what we've done in 20 to 40 years of farming this big low country. You hope to get 5 years, 3 years, 20 years?
Yeah, Peter, I think that the shattering effect, that's a great spend. That's, we used to cultivate for weeds, and it used to smear the clays on that surface, that layer of compaction on the surface, and also the compaction. The cost of the contractor doing that with a smashing operation, it fits $30 an acre. That's a good investment, I think. But at the same time, I see people deep ripping but not putting fertilizer on. And then, okay, I've done some at 300 kilos of that blend at $800. It's $1,000 today, but 300 at 800 is 240 a hectare with $100 an acre. For 50 years of 50 years of not doing that, to do it now, I think it's, again, a great investment. It's a bit of a no-brainer. Let's just fixing that up and replacing the P and the K, and the P probably wasn't there either. So, and that's then allowing us to, the roots are getting down in that deep, you know, they're going to a metre and grabbing, I don't know what's going on down there, but it's obviously, we're accessing those nutrients deeper down, and the plants having a better time throughout the, you know, that summer season. So that whole cost, I just book it up with Incitec, and they give nine months finance, you know, and worry about it in 9 months. So pay after pay, whatever you want to call it, fertilizer. It's but then when it comes around to paying the bill, the you know, the grain's there. It's just a bit of a, it's a bit of a crazy way to farm, but that's I think it's worked this year anyway.
Very good. Well, thanks, mate, for sharing your experience. Yeah, I was super impressed with what we achieved there in a short time. Obviously, it's a challenging environment to try and make, you know, these decisions on, but hopefully that gives you some confidence to keep going forwards. And there's certainly a lot tied up in it, but hopefully we're seeing the results from all that work. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, Tim, I reckon plug your data farming. I was, you know, I'd encourage everyone to get in there, and I was a bit hesitant about it. I didn't know how to use it. And then when I got in there and I started looking at the NVDI and the cloud, you started drawing the paddocks in. I don't know how much adoption out there is on that, but it's a really easy tool, and it's every farmer is ground truth, you know. That's the thing about it. It's a very neat way to make decisions. So that's, congratulations for your product where it is at the moment, you know. So
yeah, thanks, mate. I mean, we're trying to just to get people started on the journey, and then the rest follows. Is my philosophy, and that's why we've made the platform free in the first place. Is that people don't know. It's try before you buy. You don't know what you don't know, so you've got to experiment, and the only way to experiment is to take away the barriers, and that's what we've tried to do. We're just about to tick over 25,000 farms using the platform, hopefully next week. So we're still getting about 100 something farms signing up a week. So, you know, like I think that it's to kickstart that thinking process. Once you start to see it differently, then the rest will follow. Is our philosophy. So, yeah, appreciate that. That's what we're trying to achieve. And I'll give a bit of a demo on that right at the end. But next, I just unfortunately Scotty Lufton couldn't be with us today. It's crazy busy time on the farm at the moment. So he's just done a quick video for us, and so I'll just get that wired up for us now. Hopefully this works okay. Can you see that, Christian, now?
Right.
All right, I'll just hit play. Scott's just done a quick video of his crop yesterday afternoon.
Morning all, Scott Luffman from Muckadilla. Tim's asked me to do a quick webinar, quick overview of what we're up to out here in terms of data and variable rate and things. So I suppose quickly our journey started in 2013. Before that we were using Auto Farm GPS and basically just driving straight lines, and that was the start of it. 2013 we bought our first self-propelled, went to John Deere guidance, and in that wrapped into recording everything from planting rates to yields, application rates, products, weather conditions, so on and so forth. Since then we've updated our seed cart and its hydraulic drive, capable of variable rate. We haven't yet used variable rate for anything other than running in some trial plots and things. Have been using data farming platform quite a bit for ground truthing trials, early observation of trials, and ground truthing some yield data, or double checking against yield maps, soil types, etc. I suppose our plan going forward will, on some of this more sodic country over here, we'll be mucking around with a bit of gypsum and things like that. But at the moment, yeah, we're just putting zones together and trying to work out a cost-effective plan going forward. Yeah, if anyone's got any questions, I'm sure Tim's got my contact details. Yeah, yield data out of headers. We're keeping yield data, but you've always got variabilities between headers. As Tim and I were discussing yesterday, there's problems with yield mapping is a linear curve, so you use the correction that all the companies have. It's a straight line correction, whereas your yield mapping in headers is a linear curve, so you correct it for the average and you'll increase and decrease the higher and lower area variabilities. So not a perfect scenario. We're going to muck around with some load cells and try and get our yield mapping between headers more accurate. Just trying to think if there's anything more I can tell you. Yeah, the data farming platform, there's a few Ndvis out there. Agronomists use a different platform, but we're using data farming. I find it easy to use. We sent through all our shape files to Tim, and all our field boundaries are preloaded, so we can dial in there. It's also quite interesting to look at the Ndvi regional maps and see where your crop's sitting. I sort of call it bulk density, but an Ndvi reading versus neighbouring crops, different planting dates, even from field to field on your own place. Yeah, alrighty. Hope you enjoy Tim's information today, and yeah, as I said, give me a call if there's any more information you need.
Major on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, just want to clarify. Thanks to Scott for that preso. Just want to clarify one little thing there about yield monitors. There's a sort of, I guess, a misconception that if you have two different monitors in the field, you just take the average and lift one up to meet the other. It doesn't. It sort of works most cases like that, but it doesn't really ring true, because when you get the highs and low production sort of yielding areas, the response curves are different. It's actually not a straight line relationship. It's actually a curve. So you need to consider adjusting it for each part of the field, which gets very, very complicated. So I guess, Christian, you can make a comment on this. The easiest way is to actually get it calibrated properly in the first place, each header. But do you want to make some comments on that? Because it's not as easy to fix as what people think in the end.
Yeah, you do see that a lot, not just with different coloured machines, but different aged machines and just machines that are calibrated and not calibrated. The newer machines come with load cells, as Scott was talking about, that are auto-calibrating all the time. The older ones rely on you setting up for the right crop and going through the calibration process, which can be a bit time-consuming, and plenty of times people are keen to get the crop off, and that's something that they don't generally worry about. So yeah, and we saw an example yesterday where we had 3 headers in a paddock. We came up with a yield map that was very stripy, because one of the headers was doing 1.5 tonnes per hectare instead of 2.5, 2.6, which the other 2 were reporting. So there are tools around for a very quick way of getting rid of that striping, where you match the header that you think has got the best setup and is calibrated the best. You match the other headers to that, which gives you some uniformity and gets rid of that striping, and I suppose it helps identify the trends across the paddock. But as Tim says, it's not a it's a curve, so you're kind of bumping up every area across the paddock, which by the same rate, which is not necessarily what occurs throughout the paddock.
Cool. Just to finish off on, I just want to give a quick demo of the data farming platform for those that haven't made this step yet and just want to get some free data to have a look at. Then I think it's a great place to start. So you can, I'm just sharing my screen now. You can either log in to just directly to maps.datafarming.com.au, or there's a big green button on the website. If you're coming in for the first time, it'll ask you to sign up or log in. So I've already signed up, obviously. So all you need to sign up is just an email, and you create your own password. Once you click into the platform, you can start adding farms, and this will take a little bit longer as we're screen sharing, but this is all my farms listed here. You can simply add a farm, and once you've done that, you can either here's one down here somewhere where you can upload the shapefile. So if you're getting that out of another piece of software, or you're getting it from Google Earth or AgWorld or Back Paddock or somewhere else, you can bring that in, or you can just sit there and draw your own regardless. Just a very, very simple drawing tool built into the software just to click around and draw a paddock. You can also share your farm. Say you've got an agronomist and you want to share it with them. You just click there, and it will share that farm with other registered users. This one's been shared with me, and I can just quickly go in and view that as a demo property. You'll see all your field boundaries come in when they're all preloaded. As soon as you click on a paddock, all of the available satellite data pops up. So you can see here, the last image on this paddock was 3 days ago. It had 52% cloud, so not real flash. And if I just check this cloud button here from the 5th of September, it said it had 58% cloud. You've got to be really careful that you don't have any images that have got cloud or cloud shadow on them. That will disrupt the Ndvi readings considerably. And this, obviously, you can see here, the red is auto detecting cloud, and it doesn't do a 100% job. So that's why we've put this little button on here to actually to do that. This image here is free from cloud, so you can see just the normal red, green, blue image from that day just by clicking that cloud button anyway. And that's coming through there now, so that gives you a bit of an idea. Scott talked about the Ndvi, which is the vegetation index on a regional wide basis, so you can have a look at your farm in relation to all your neighbours, check out your neighbours' crops, and also anything black on here is actual water. So you can see the index is from 0 to 1. Anything above 0.2 is generally crop, up to a 0.85 is about the maximum you're going to see. So now if we look at that same image on that day, if I click the Ndvi button now for that date, it's going away and it's clipping that image to that field boundary and stretching the colours appropriately. Now, the reason we do that is because we want you, when you're sampling this field, you want to go to the highest and lowest areas of the paddock. And you can see here the lowest areas are 0.4 up to 0.85. That's about as good as you're going to get in this area, this blue area here. And that's the poorest area there. So it gives you a bit of an idea of the highs and lows for that particular day. If you want to do some rapid zoning, I mean, there's a range of other software to do this, but on here it auto creates 3 zones for you. So on that image date, you click zone VRT, and that separates that image into 3 zones, which is what we did on Trent's place. You simply add the rates. Might have 1,700 kilos here and 2,000 kilos here and 3,000 kilos here. Well, it tells you how many kilos of product you need, and we just charge a small fee to get those That's a per hectare fee. But once you pay for that, you get the file, which has all those rates embedded, and yeah, that goes through to pretty much any machine. On Friday, like I said, we'll be talking to all the manufacturers. So listen in for them about how to take it to the next step with all the manufacturers. But that gives you a bit of a snapshot overview of how you can get access to free data straight away just to get started on this whole journey. Yeah, feel free to get in and use that. Any problems, send us an email. So that pretty well covers everything we needed to cover today. For any more questions, feel free to send them through. I'd like to thank again GRDC for funding these workshops. I really appreciate them putting the effort in to actually get this in front of growers. And I really appreciate the growers' time, Trent, Peter, and I really appreciate you giving up time of your very busy schedule at the moment to join us. It makes a world of difference to hear directly from growers rather than from experts all the time, and I think that's been much appreciated. All the other workshops have run exactly the same, really, really well, and we appreciate you spending that time with us. At the end of this, when we end the webinar, there will be a link for an evaluation. If you can please fill in that link, that really helps us get feedback on what's useful for you. So if you can do that at the end of the webinar, that'd be great. Thanks very much again for joining us, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you.